A quick note about ArmorMesh and the best way to string it. Or I should say the best as in one of the ways to string it. And this is a way that I think is maybe the most simple, probably the most easy to grasp and replicate in different types of heads. So when we're stringing a lacrosse head, right, I'm looking at the back of the scoop right now, and I typically will string looking at the back of the mesh and the outside of the sidewall rail. So pretty much what we're doing here is we're going to take the string down through the back of the mesh, and you see here I've already got some widened gaps in the mesh. Already strung this this piece of ArmorMesh, so those are from that. But we're gonna pull the string through the back of the mesh, and then we're gonna tie it to the top or the outside of the sidewall rail. And so we're pretty much doing special interlocks, and I think I already have a tutorial on the special interlock, kind of the basics of it, and so I'll put a link in the description of this video so you can kind of see how that's done. I'll probably include also the special interlock tutorial from either Mainly Mesh or Greg from East Coast Dives, because I learned from those guys years ago. But anyway, we're going to special interlock all the way down. We don't really need to stack any diamonds because there's so many diamonds that you can just use one at a time per sidewall hole. We'll talk about spacing and some other things, but that's kind of the basic idea. So I'll show another picture in a minute. So I got my sidewall string in place. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to guess. So you have to be willing to take an educated guess when you're stringing, especially a type of mesh or a head that you haven't strung before. I get so many emails, text messages, DMs on Instagram, and comments asking for sidewall patterns. You're going to learn how to string more easily. You're going to learn more easily, and stringing will be easier for you if you just do it yourself. Just be willing to guess. So since this mesh has these horizontal lines, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These horizontal lines in this outer column going down here. It almost looks like the rungs of a ladder. I'm just going to pick a gap between two lines. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to put this string in right here. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these horizontal lines before I pass the sidewall string through the back of the mesh. So we've taken the sidewall string through the back of the mesh, and now we're going to go through the outside of a sidewall hole. And again, just take a guess here. So in the top, I'd say the top 1/3 of the pocket, or of the mesh, we want to create tension. So we want to pull the mesh outward, and we want to pull it down. That's going to create kind of the, I guess, the ears of the channel, if you think about it that way. So pretty much this part of the mesh from here to there, this kind of triangle right here of the mesh, it needs to be pretty tight, and it needs to be kind of flat. Okay, like we want the ball to go through the channel. That means we don't want the ball to rest comfortably up here in the ears of the pocket. So we want to make this mesh tight, and we want to make it kind of flat so that the ball doesn't comfortably sit right here. The ball is forced into the part of the mesh where it can rest, which is the channel, which is the whole point. So I'm just going to go through. I'm going to pull this all the way through eventually. So now this shape right here, going through the mesh, going from the outside of the sidewall hole in and pulling up and across, this is an interlock right here. What makes it a special interlock is if it sits inside what would normally be called a mesh diamond, but for now we'll call a mesh rectangle. I'll call it a diamond just because that's what I'm used to referring to it as, especially with mesh. No need to really call it anything different, even though it's not a diamond. I guess from here it's kind of like a rhombus, but anyway, We're going to make this special interlock sit inside this diamond by going down here. So now the string is crossed, and now I'm going to go back through and up through the front of the mesh in that same diamond. That'll create the special interlock. So another thing with just kind of stringing in general, don't be in a rush. So don't, if you do this wrong and then you string the rest of the sidewall because you're in a rush to get a newly strung pocket, you're going to have some problems. So with the first interlock or knot or whatever it is you start your sidewall pattern with, this is just for stringing in general. Don't speed past this and crank it down tightly and then string the rest of the sidewall pattern. Take a look at it. It should look kind of like this. So we have a string going through the back of the mesh and then through the outside of the sidewall hole, and then it's going up through the face of the mesh, and then it's crossing that first part of the string. It's crossing over it. So if it doesn't look like that, go back, do it slowly, make sure it looks right, and then you can tighten it. I could do all of the rest of the special interlocks in this pocket without tightening the string, just to make sure it looks right, and then I can tighten the slack through. I'll tighten this one just so you can see what it should look like when it's tightened, and then I'll do a few more, and we'll go from there. I've pulled this special interlock tightly, and so now you can see, and you can especially see the mesh being channeled with ArmorMesh, so it kind of acts as a stringing guide in that way. But you see how these horizontal lines in the middle of the mesh are just straight across, and then as you go toward the ears of the pocket, these horizontal lines kind of curve downward. So the mesh is being pulled outward and it's being pulled down by the sidewall string. That is what's creating our channel. So this mesh right here is tight and the ball's not going to comfortably sit there. See how the mesh here is hanging loose? As we string the rest of this sidewall pattern, we'll notice that this top corner of the mesh will stay flat and these horizontal strings will be pulled downward and they'll be angled downward on the sidewall rail. And that'll make this part of the mesh tighter, while this part of the mesh in the middle will stay loose, and that's what's going to give the ball a channel to go through. So I finished this sidewall pattern. For reference, I've never strung this head before. I'm not even sure what head it is. It's by Signature Lacrosse. I think it's one of their newer ones because I don't remember this, but I might look up the name of the head later and put it in the description. But it doesn't say anything as far as what head it is. But anyway, so I say that to say that this isn't a sidewall pattern that I've necessarily memorized for this head. And again, this is addressing the many comments and emails and texts and messages that I get from people asking for sidewall patterns. And I know that they're asking because they are excited about learning how to string, and of course they want some structure and some guidance, and I understand that. But I'm more interested in sharing the things that I think about when I'm creating a sidewall pattern, so that after watching videos like this, you can begin to come up with your own sidewall patterns. I'm more interested in that than just sharing my patterns. I don't think I did anything special here that, you know, if I shared my professional stringing pattern with someone, that they would be able to create consistently good pockets. I think there's more to it than that. So there's some know-how behind it, and so this is an example of kind of applying that know-how. So we can look at the inside of the sidewall rail to see kind of the spacing between these special interlocks. I pretty much, after I skipped 5 lines up here and then an interlock, and then 4 and then an interlock, I pretty much skipped 4 lines in the mesh and then did a special interlock in the diamond after the 4th line. I did that consistently all the way down the sidewall rail. So nothing special. There are no 1 KSIs or stack special interlocks, anything like that. This is as simple as it gets. But notice that I skipped 2 holes and then skipped 2 holes and then skipped 2 holes. So we're channeling the mesh, we're pulling it tightly along the outside here in this upper corner, or this upper ear of the mesh. And then I went to just skipping 1 hole the rest of the way down. So here, where there's only 1 hole skipped between these special interlocks, this is where I'm loosening the mesh. So I went from creating tension in the top third or maybe the top half of the sidewall rail to loosening the mesh. This is where I want the ball to sit. And realistically, it'll probably sit more like here. But the point is that I'm not tensioning the mesh all the way down, but I'm also not loosening the mesh all the way up here. So tighten the mesh first, create tension, create the channel, and then you can loosen the mesh and actually form the pocket, which then will actually shape and I guess form the channel. So I'll do the other side now. For reference, most stringers will say you always want to cut more string than you think you'll need. So this is excess from my top string. You see how long that is? And then this is, for reference, this is the length of the head, and this is the sidewall string I'm using. So it's 3 times the length of the head. Am I going to need all that string? Absolutely not. This is all of the excess from stringing one sidewall. But you want to cut more than you need, because if you get to here and you run out of string, then you're going to either bunch up a bunch of diamonds, or you're going to end up over channeling the mesh so that you don't use as much string. And you're going to think more about conserving string than you are going to think about the placement and shape and depth of the pocket. So cut more string than you think you need. Buy a spool on either the Lex Room website or Stringer Shack or Sports Stop, or really anywhere. But I would recommend, if you are trying to figure out how to string your own lacrosse heads, buy a spool of string, because then you won't be so worried about the length of string that you have. Getting ready to string the other sidewall string. This is a good time to address what is probably already in some comments either on Instagram or YouTube, which is that this mesh is asymmetrical, and I know that. But you can go ahead and string both sidewalls the same, because it's not asymmetrical by more than just one diamond or one line of mesh, and really it doesn't make that big of a difference. We're starting to notice a few things. This mesh across the top, across the scoop, is pretty flat, and the ball doesn't want to rest comfortably up here. That's important because this is the widest part of the head, and if the ball rested comfortably up here, then it might roll around from side to side. And then when you're releasing the ball, it might release in the middle, but it might release over here, it might release over there. What we want to do is channel the ball through the middle of the scoop, so that it can release consistently. We've pulled this mesh at the top tightly, maybe too tightly, right? Again, I'm kind of making this pattern up for the sake of this video, but also look at what's happening. We're starting to channel, and I'll push this up a little bit. We're starting to channel the mesh. So the ball will roll through this channel and out through this middle column of the mesh. So when you're thinking of how to string your pocket, keep that in mind. You want to space these diamonds apart further up here at the top, and you want to bunch them closer together wherever you want the ball to rest. One last note for stringing, again, this is with any mesh and any head. This is not where you judge how this pocket turned out or how it's going to behave, how it's going to play. We need a bottom string so that we can tell when this mesh is pulled down where the ball is going to sit, how the pocket's going to behave. So I would add a bottom string and then pound it out. This is mesh that I've strung with before. I've used it before, so it's already got a little bit of shape to it. But normally with new mesh, it'll be a little bit tighter. So we want to add a bottom string, make it tight, pound the pocket out, and then you'll be able to assess the placement of the pocket. You'll be able to assess the depth and how the ball behaves in the pocket. But a lot of times, newer stringers will get to this point and they'll say the pocket's not high enough, not low enough, not deep enough, right? The channel isn't tight enough. The pocket is going to be way different when there's a bottom string attached, and we need this bottom string in place in order to see what and how the pocket actually is. Alright, so now we're done. So you can see the mesh starts, those horizontal lines go straight across. Then as we get toward the ears of the head, they start to angle down. The mesh is tight up here, and it loosens as we get toward the bottom of the head. This is the channel that the ball is going to travel through. So we'll look at it from this side. We see a channel right there. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. I'm going to add some shooting strings and show the final product. So when you get to here, and if the pocket isn't exactly what you want, it's important that we get a really clear idea of how or why it's not what you want. If I want this pocket to sit higher, first, why? Why do I want the... If I don't want more whip, then the ball doesn't really need to sit higher. Quicker release and things like that are... they have a lot more to do with the player and wrists and style of play than you know, obviously pocket as an impact on that, right? It factors in. But this pocket may be a mid-low. Certainly it's not quite a mid because the mesh is a little bit too flat up here. But when the ball is in the pocket, it's going to push a little bit of this part of the mesh up because the ball is dense. So that channel is going to be a little bit more defined, and the pocket's going to shift upward a little bit, especially up against the shooters that are going to go across the top of the mesh. So even after we add a bottom string, if it's not the shape you want, if it doesn't look right, if the sides aren't symmetrical, go ahead and make those changes. But even now, we really don't know how the pocket behaves. Put a ball in, put it on a shaft, mess with it before you put some shooters in, see how it throws, maybe see how it shoots, shoot some soft shots and just kind of see what personality the pocket has. And then you can go and adjust the sidewall pattern if you need to. So here's what that pocket looks like, all strung up with some shooters. It's a mid or mid-low. I would say a mid-low pocket. Is it too deep? Will it have enough whip? Not sure yet. I'm going to go out and toss with it